Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of Catching Up on JP, where today we're going to go through two more events that were supposed to happen somewhere in the time before Arc 2 or around the release of Arc 2, one of which is the Otsukimi event and the other one is Rumors in Disguise, which is the second part of the Susanoo events. One of these events is absolutely goddamn crazy and weird, and it's not the Susanoo event, so let's start with our first event. Otsukimi after an elegant tea party. And I think Otsukimi just means moon viewing. So we start out at Mizuna Academy, where there's apparently going to be some tea party and some moon viewing and just some general festivities going to be held with special guests from the Saint Liliana Academy, who, in case you don't know, are basically where all the super rich and hyper privileged girls go to. For example, that's where Toka goes to, so you know the kind of people that go to that school. In that school is also a new character introduced to us, our hero of this story, Yukika, who has the day off and usually would be at that tea party, but she wants to go somewhere else because she wants to go gambling, because that's kind of what she does. She really likes gambling. And she's also a magical girl already in this story. And while she tries to get to the game center and tries to go gambling, she actually suddenly gets teleported back to the school because that's just kind of like her magic. And Yukika just sort of shrugs and goes, yeah, whatever, that just happens sometimes, you know? So at the tea party though, there's some trouble brewing, because as it turns out, Tsukuyo was supposed to be there and attend and play flute or whatever, but it turns out she can't make it for some reason, and so instead Yukika has to sort of help organize the event a little bit more and help out in her stead as much as she can. So while she was helping out at the event now, suddenly she finds a bag with a white feather robe in it and a note on it that apparently she wrote to Tsukuyo, but she neither remembers the white feather robe, nor does she remember actually writing a note to Tsukuyo, so something weird is going on. Also, I think I need to tell you guys that Yukiko did indeed used to be part of the Wings of Magius beforehand. That's kind of backstory, so she is used to kind of Magius stuff, but yeah, she doesn't remember any of this happening at all in here, like the feather robe or the note, so what happens there? So then more guests arrive at the tea party, and as it turns out, among those people arriving are the two other very important characters to the story, the Yusuki twins, Hotori and Rion, because they wanted to introduce two new twins, because the Amane twins, they just weren't enough for the manga record developers, so instead we have two new twins, Hotori and Rion. There's also another really important character to this entire cloud of people, but she's not currently arriving. She might arrive way later. That character is called Yuna with two U's, because there's also another Yuna with just one U, but yeah, we're gonna get past that confusion at some point, I hope. So Yukika continues working on the tea party, and at some point she realizes that she can't really get to the dorm. Like, whenever she tries to get to the dorm, something stops her from doing it. And this time, for example, when she tries to go to the dorm, Hotori and Rion, they both intercept her, and they just fight a familiar right then and there that they have sensed, because Hotori and Rion, they're also magic girls. So after transforming, Yukika somehow notices that when she transformed, she didn't just transform into her regular outfit. She, for some reason, was wearing the white feather robe from earlier. She just randomly was wearing that. So they fight the familiar. After the battle, though, Hotori and Rion, they both approach Yukika, and they're like, hey, we remember this. We remember this white feather that at some point in the past saved us from a witch, but we don't really remember much more either. We just remember sort of that image of a white feather saving us, and they say that they were black feathers as well. And that's really odd as well. Something is really weird is going on here. Yeah. So Yukika then says to herself, well, I need to return the robe, and she thinks that it probably belongs to Tsukuyo, and even if it doesn't, probably Tsukuyo knows where it's from, maybe even Mitama knows where it's from, whatever. So she wants to return the robe and maybe write a note to Tsukuyo, and then she suddenly has this weird lapse in her memory where she kind of remembers, wait, I did write the note, but I also went gambling. And she seems to believe that there's these two realities of her going gambling and her actually being there with the white robe and then returning the white robe to Tsukuyo. Both of those realities are happening at the same time. That's just a theory that she herself came up with, though, so maybe it's not quite right. But Yukika at least guesses that there are some alternate realities overlapping her. Maybe there's some D4C going on in the distance, and she might be fluctuating between these two realities. So then Yukika heads back to the dorm once again, and it turns out there's a witch labyrinth that has formed there in the dorm or around the dorm. And meanwhile, Miss Very Rich Large Money, Yuna Kaharu. So in case you don't know how rich Yuna is, with two U, she's so rich, she's arriving in her private helicopter on site. However, while Yukika enters the labyrinth and you've got the helicopter landing outside, it turns out that the dorm is suddenly shaking, and it seems like the dorm is about to collapse and bury everyone under it. So in the labyrinth, Yukika is now, and she finds a Kyubey there, who is apparently the only Kyubey in all of Kamihama, because as it turns out, there was a short time where the barrier that held out Kyubey was gone. I think it was in the time when Eve in the Chapter 10 battle was first defeated, so it went down, and then it got brought back to life again, like a few minutes later. That was like a very short time when the barrier was down, and one Kyubey snuck in, and this is the Kyubey that's like apparently the only Kyubey in all of Kamihama. And the Kyubey is right there, and that Kyubey gives a little bit of backstory on what is going on this right here in this dorm. And Kyubey explains that there was indeed an alternate timeline, and on that alternate timeline it turns out that Rion was a normal human being and only Hotori was a magical girl, and she was also a black feather. And in that timeline, in that original timeline, Yukika did indeed go gambling. However, what happened then was Hotori instead had to battle this witch alone in the dorm, but that witch was too powerful, she was about to lose, and then some mysterious person in a white feather robe appeared and saved her and Rion, who was also there in that barrier, in that labyrinth. And so that white feather led the two to safety, but in that effort the white feather perished. I think he got killed by the witch. So then, while they both are making their way out, both Hotori and Rion, it turns out the dorm is about to collapse on both of them, and so Hotori sacrifices herself to save Rion. So Rion is basically the only survivor of that entire battle. And so Rion finds the original, the only Kyubey that is left in Kamihama, this Kyubey right here, finds that Kyubey and makes the wish to stop the building from collapsing so that maybe everyone can survive. However, there's a really big problem with that, and that is that Rion does not have enough karmic burden to actually make that wish happen. And so what happens is the wish instead drags Yukika out of her timeline into a new timeline, and then in that alternate timeline, Yukika then has to play the role of the white feather robe person and save everyone and stop the dorm from collapsing, or at least get everyone to safety before it does. I don't quite know how apparently that wish takes less karmic burden than just making the building not collapse in the first place, but apparently that's how it works. Apparently creating new timelines takes basically no karmic burden. So yeah, Yukika is now trapped in that new alternate timeline where now she basically has to play the role of the white feather robe person and save both Hotori and Rion, who are apparently also in the labyrinth. And right on cue, both Hotori and Rion also appear, and Yukika finds them. So now they are tasked with fighting the witch and somehow getting everyone to survive. So what happens is Yukika gets Hotori and Rion, both of them, to safety outside of the dorm, so that if the dorm collapses, they're both safe. However, Yukika stays behind and tries to beat the witch. However, still, the witch is just too powerful. And Yukika is actually about to die, as for some reason the last Kyubey takes a hit, like sacrifices itself for Yukika. That's completely out of character for Kyubey, but I guess the writers really wanted Kyubey, like this specific Kyubey, out of the story, because they didn't want the Kyubey to be in Kamihama after all, so they just typed in, and then the Kyubey dies into their script and just shipped it. So yeah, the Kyubey sacrifices itself and just dies, and then Yukika ends up releasing her doppel, which still work, and she wasn't quite aware of this, but yeah, they still work, even after what happened in Chapter 10. She defeats the witch with the doppel, she makes it out alive, everyone's happy and fine again. The two timelines merge, so now there's still only one timeline left. Both Hotori and Rion are still magical girls, everything is fine again. Yay! The mystery still remains, who was that original white feather robe person? I don't know why I keep saying white feather robe, but who was the original white feather? I think it's not outright stated, but I'm rather certain that it was indeed Tsukuyo, because also in the alternate timeline, Tsukuyo for some reason can't attend. It's like she has a sick person in the family that she needs to take care of. I'm rather certain that it was her. It also seemed to be her robe, and that just in this alternate timeline she couldn't make it, and that's how Yukika was able to play her role. This also means that there apparently was a timeline where Tsukuyo sacrificed herself and died. Well, at least it's not the real timeline that we're in right now, so she's still fine. So after that whole event happened, after the entire tea party went down, Yukika then goes and visits some Kyubey outside of Kamihama and basically tells them about this. They basically have no idea what happened in Kamihama because they don't even care about Kamihama anymore, and they basically just tell her, like, we're done with Kamihama, we're just gonna go, and you guys can do in Kamihama whatever the fuck you want. We don't care anymore. So after that, Yukika wants to go home, but as it turns out, she suddenly gets teleported into another witch labyrinth together with Hotori and Rion, and apparently they have to help out Yuna with something because she's in trouble, but that's where the event just ends. Suzune Event Part 2, Rumors in Disguise. So for this event, we are now being faced with this Ripper rumor that was started at the very end of the last Suzune event, the rumor that Nanaka started about this Ripper that was going around asking people for their name and then killing them or something like that. However, that rumor has made its way all the way to Hosoki City, where Suzune Magika would take place, and the main characters that we know from the Suzune Part 1 event, as well as some new ones, have picked up on this rumor, and they decide to investigate because they know that it originally originated from Kamihama. So they go over there with Kamihama, and Suzune is also traveling by herself. So now the main characters that we are going to follow are Chisato and Arisa, who we already know, but the new characters are Haruka and Matsuri that are also going to be on this journey. And of course, as I said, Suzune is also traveling alone, and she will also be joining us at some later point. So in Kamihama City, they find out that this rumor is separate from the person that I guess the original Ripper rumor was supposed to be about, and now the rumor has mutated into something completely different. So this specific rumor that they find out that is going around in Kamihama City now is also asking people for the name, but then it just takes them away, and it can also take on the faces of people that it took away, or something along those lines. So Arisa and Matsuri, they split off, and they run into that rumor, the Uwasa, because it is an Uwasa, and they notice that it is indeed cycling through the appearances of some people, and more specifically, it cycles through the appearances of Nanaka's Mafia, minus Meiyu. Meiyu is in there, but I don't think they know Meiyu's name. They just go, oh, there's some weird Chinese girl in there, probably a Kung Fu master or something. And this Uwasa then asks both of them for their names as well, and Arisa, she ends up giving a fake name, and while Matsuri gives her real name, and the Uwasa attacks both of them anyway. However, after that, we then see a sort of meanwhile section where we find that Natsuki, for some reason, yes, Natsuki, who everyone forgets even exists, she exists, and she runs into Suzune somehow, who runs away from her by the time that both Chisato and Haruka arrive at the scene as well. There's also meanwhile, back at where the Uwasa attack happened, we see that Kanoko is also there somehow. She's also part of the story now, and she finds Matsuri and Arisa, who were passed out after the fight with the Uwasa, and all the other characters, they now meet up again. So all the characters are once again in one spot. So there's just some weird Suzune Magika backstory here, not anything important. However, the only thing that really matters is that for some reason, both Arisa and Matsuri seem to be suddenly having fake memories implanted, and they don't know why or how. So Aimi is also suddenly a thing in this story, because she gives Natsuki a call, and Aimi tells Natsuki on the phone that apparently she has some intel. She's going to write it down on a note, and they should just come and get it. I don't know why she can't say it on the phone. Maybe it's a bit too much. Who knows? Maybe it's a bit like the start of the latest Star Wars, where they have this special spy information that's literally just a single sentence, but they need to download it on site, whatever. So she wants to get this info to them, and so what happens is the group splits up once again, because why not split the group up all the time? So Kanoko, Arisa, and Chisato, those three form a team, and they head back to where Arisa and Matsuri were attacked earlier, while Natsuki, Haruka, and Matsuri herself, they all meet up with Aimi, or at least they try to. Because as it turns out, meanwhile, Aimi manages to somehow catch a glimpse of Susune, and they talk a little bit, but Susune of course runs away, but Aimi follows her, and they both end up getting attacked by the Uwasa. So Aimi, she doesn't know much about Susune, she just goes, here, take this note, I'm going to stop the Uwasa, take this note, give it to these people that I'm going to tell you about, and we of course know that Susune is kind of a bad guy, so is Susune actually going to do this, or is she just going to say, fuck it, I don't care? She actually does it. Susune actually does take the note and says, yes, I will give them the information, don't worry about it. So she leaves Aimi basically to not die, but she basically just leaves her behind against the rumor and runs away. So then Susune, she runs away and she bumps into Matsuri, and the Uwasa then once again immediately shows up before them again, so it seems like Aimi didn't really do a whole lot. Susune now instead tries to stop the Uwasa herself, and tells Matsuri to deliver the note in her stead to the rest of the team while she is trying to fend off the rumor. So Matsuri then runs away as told, and she manages to find at least Natsuki and Haruka and delivers the note so they all can have a look at it. However, meanwhile, the other half of the group, they also find the Uwasa, which I think happens probably like a few seconds or minutes after this, and they head out, and Chisato and Kanoko both attack the Uwasa while Arisa is now too scared, and both Kanoko and Chisato, they both disappear, probably something. So it seems like the rumor is indeed gobbling up people, so they both get gobbled up by rumor, and Arisa runs away again. You can kind of see that this story is all about just seeing the Uwasa and then running away and then people getting gobbled up, kind of like a slasher movie. It's basically a slasher movie, which kind of makes sense because this is basically the rumor of the slasher. So they also notice now that the Uwasa has taken on the faces of Susune and Chisato and Kanoko, all the people that were gobbled up. I think Aimi in there as well, and of course the rest of the Nanaka Mafia from before. So everyone who hasn't been gobbled up by the Uwasa at this point, they all meet up again. Hopefully they're not going to split the party again, because this is now the second or third time they split the party up in a slasher movie basically. So they all argue about what they need to do. They need to stay put. Do they need to attack the Uwasa? What should they do? And Arisa just sort of has enough of it and just runs out again. Once again, splitting up the party. Good job. So Arisa runs out and wants to find the Uwasa and confront the Uwasa head on once again, because that has worked so well all so far. And of course the rest of the team then goes and catches up with Arisa, and they all confront the Uwasa together. And then at some point while they are fighting the Uwasa switches to Chisato's face, and Arisa of course recognizes Chisato's face and goes, hey Chisato, and just by saying Chisato's name, for some reason the Uwasa then spits out Chisato and frees Chisato, and Chisato then reveals that the reason why they were all gobbled up to begin with is because they refused to give the Uwasa their names. The Uwasa doesn't know their real names, but at least if you give them a name, it wouldn't gobble you up. That's why that happened earlier. However, it would still attack you for some reason. The rules aren't quite that obvious, I guess. So now that with that, all of that information that the team has, the team figures out, also together with the note that Aimi has, they figure out that in order to save people from the rumor, they basically have to call their real names, and so they call out the names of Kanoko, of Kako, of Akira, of Nanaka, all the people who they know were gobbled up, and they all are freed immediately. However, there's of course a bunch of people missing, so Nanaka tells them like, hey guys, did you forget about my Chinese girl? Did you forget about Meiyui? And I guess my Aimi is also still missing, so they go back and they save Aimi and Meiyui as well. However, there's one big problem. There's now two people left. There's the original Uwasa itself, and there's Susune. However, no one knows Susune's name. Except from Matsuri, because Matsuri actually used to be a childhood friend of Susune. However, because of Matsuri suddenly having fake memories implanted from earlier, she doesn't remember her name anymore. So Matsuri then fights the Uwasa head on, and at least at some point during the fight, Matsuri is actually able to barely remember Susune's name, and with that they're able to free Susune as well. And so the only thing that is really left is the original face of the Uwasa, and somehow Haruka is just able to guess that the original name of the Uwasa must be Susunone. I don't quite know how, if someone else has better information on this, who's maybe who can actually read Japanese themselves. Maybe you can give a better understanding of why Haruka was able to figure out it was called Susunone. But yeah, apparently that's the correct name of the original Uwasa's face, and so the Uwasa is dispelled and everyone is happy and fine again. Somehow then also everyone just forgets this Uwasa ever even existed, and instead they believe that, oh yeah, on that day we just fought a witch in Kamihama, and that's all that happened. That's basically all that people remember now at this point. So then there's one last scene that's going on here, and some people who've read Susanoo Magica might can get sort of an understanding of what is going on here. So there's a mysterious figure who talks about her plan not succeeding to Kyubei, and Kyubei is like, oh, you almost were able to make your plan work using that ability of yours to rewrite memories. So yeah, that's a pretty big giveaway for which character that is supposed to be from Susanoo Magica. So then the figure just goes, yeah, I'll just make everyone forget about what happened and get everyone back to Hosoki City and make sure that basically that the events of Susanoo Magica can take place, because this is all supposed to take place before Susanoo Magica, which is because, you know, they kind of have to make sure now that Susanoo Magica can take place without all of this baggage. So they just go, yeah, everyone just forgets about everything, and then Susanoo Magica can take place and everything is fine. End. That was that. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.